fantastically. Fans were going crazy. This was, I don't know about you, Will, but this is the first time that I've seen the student section literally overflowing during all my years at Cal. And they blew it, to say the least, after that, in terms of the game and probably students coming back to the games. After that, Berkeley's not much of a football town to begin with, and they kind of had their opportunity and did not make the most of it. So, Will, why don't you get us started? We were right next to each other in the box, seeing it all unfold right in front of us, and it felt like Cal, to say the least.
It was exactly a Cal game. Going up 14-0 in the first quarter, I'm like, we're going to the Rose Bowl. I really thought we looked great. We set the running game early, established that super early. We just looked great. It didn't seem like Nevada had any answers for our offense. And I guess we can get into what went wrong later on. But what was working in that first quarter was the run game. I think we're getting great push on that left side of the line. Damian Moore was busting out some great runs. The offense just looked solid. It opened up a few opportunities for Chase Garbers in the passing game. It looked really solid. And like you said, the student section was going. You can tell us what happened in the last three quarters. Give us your take, and then I'll tell us ours.
Yeah, I mean, I said as one of our keys to the game on last week's episode of Bear Dash that my biggest thing was pound the ball on the ground, let it open up the passing game, like you just said. And I did not say to pound the ball and then completely abandon the ground game, which is exactly what they did. I mean, it's just the old saying, don't fix what's not broken. And it was not broken at all. I mean, Damian Moore was having a fantastic game. Christopher Brooks was having a fantastic game until he had to leave with an injury. And really all of Cal's running backs played phenomenally throughout the entire game. If you take out Garber's rushing stats, which he was not effective at all with his feet, he had negative rushing yards, which is obviously not what you want to see out of a quarterback who's supposedly dual threat. But if you take just Cal's running backs, they averaged 7.5 yards per carry on the game, which is obviously an absurd number and one that should win you a football game if you stick with rushing the ball. I mean, everyone was contributing, but for some reason, Musgrave had Garbers attempt 38 passes while he was averaging under 5 yards per attempt, which makes no sense in my mind. There's no reason to veer so hard away from the running game, especially in the second and third quarters. And that's really what allowed the momentum to shift to Nevada's side. I think the defense had its lapses, but they were overall playing well enough to win. And on the offensive side, Cal was really controlling the tempo, possessed the ball really well. That first drive, I believe, lasted almost 10 minutes. And they just completely abandoned it. And I have no idea why. I know that the team has high expectations for Garbers, and I know Musgrave probably wanted to get him involved, but there was no reason to just force feed him opportunities when the running game was so strong. But
it almost seemed like they were trying to force feed Garbers into, I don't know, having like a breakout game, but at the same time, it was only conservative passing plays. There are a few pitch plays, a few screen passes, but it was clear that Musgrave didn't trust him to throw the ball.
It seems like there was no intermediate game either. Like you said, it was all just pitches, screens, short out routes, and they took a few deep shots. None of them really went well. I think there was maybe like 1-2 completions maybe, but like it seemed like there was barely any passes that were even between like, I don't know, like 7 and 8 yards and 15 yards, like nothing that's enough to get you those third and short opportunities or convert a first down before you get to third down. And that was something that really only happened in the run game, and they just completely abandoned it.
Right. And like you said, why is Bill Musgrave giving Chase Garbers 38 attempts? Why? It's not as if Chase Garbers, came into the season as a Heisman favorite. He's not Spencer Rattler. He's not Sam Howell. I don't understand, especially given the fact that those two drives in the first quarter were all due to the running game. I think on the first drive, Moore had 7 carries for 32 yards, so just solid. There were a few instances where he almost broke away for big gains, and I'm sure that would have kept happening. And I'm sure Chase Garbers could have gotten some deep balls going if they'd stuck with the running game and switched it up a little bit. I think Nevada's defense knew, okay, even on 3rd and 2, they're going to be passing. So let's just sit back. Like, there was no need to be wary of the running game at all.
Yeah, and I think looking towards the second and third quarter especially, which is when Cal veered away from the running game the most, Cal had a drive or a span of 4 drives where they netted a total of 34 yards. And when you get 34 yards over 4 drives, that means something went horribly wrong. And that's just completely unacceptable for a team that was supposed to have a brand new revamped playbook from the 2020 season. Bill Musgrave's supposed to let everyone loose. Cal's receivers were supposed to, all these young players coming in, highly touted recruits, and obviously all the veterans, Remigio, Kekoa Crawford, Trevon Clark. And, it's hard to pinpoint whether it was just the receivers getting a lack of separation or Garbers being too timid to, be aggressive and throw down the field. Obviously, near the end of the game in the fourth quarter, he tried to target Hunter down the field, and it was just a botched pass. I don't know why he was even looking that way because there was over-the-top help from the safety. But I think all in all, it was just a horrible performance from the offense, apart from the run game. I think the run game, the offensive line, and the running backs did fantastic jobs.
Yeah, and that's where good coaching comes in. That's where Bill Musgrave in the first quarter needs to say, this is what's working and this is what's not, changing his game plan. It's almost like he went in saying, we're going to run the ball in the first quarter and then we're going to pass the ball for the rest of the game. He wasn't going to deviate from that. So I'm hoping against TCU, Musgrave doesn't stick to his guns. I'm not exactly sure what he saw after that first quarter, or where he thought he saw the offense going after that first quarter. There were still not answers after the game either. Wilcox offered very little in the way of explanation. He basically said, "Oh, we tried to keep running the ball. There were a few instances where we went backwards." I think he pointed to a few plays where they had negative yardage, and that's going to happen when you run the ball. But he offered very little. We're still not sure exactly why they stopped running the ball pretty much at all. We ran the ball 6 times in the second and third quarters, whereas Moore had 7 carries in the first drive alone. I'm not exactly sure what was going on in their minds. Still not sure.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. I mean, fans have every right to be mad. But really quickly, definitely want to touch on the defensive side of things, because we've definitely given the offense its fair share of criticism, and the defense, I thought, had some bright spots, but overall didn't quite live up to expectations. I mean, don't get me wrong, Carson Strong and those receivers are all extremely talented. I mean, we knew this would be a tough test for the Cal defense, but, there were some things that didn't quite go Cal's way. And I think one of them was that the secondary clearly needs some work. Chiggy, who's supposed to be one of Cal's star cornerbacks, he had a couple lapses, 1 pass interference call, and then 1 deep pass that was extremely well thrown by Carson Strong. I mean, it fell right into the receiver's lap, and the coverage honestly was not that bad. But I think the biggest rough spot for Cal, and we might have seen this coming because he's such a young kid, but Colin Gamble really got burned a few times. He gave up a touchdown earlier in the game, which maybe was a miscommunication with Elijah Hicks. But, I mean, he was kind of just getting worked on the fade balls. And his recovery speed isn't the worst. And, he just needs to trust that a bit more, I guess. Or I don't really know what the issue is. But I think the secondary definitely, did not live up to Cal's reputation as having one of the best pass defenses in the nation.
Right. And it makes sense. Gamble's a second year. He's a true sophomore. He only played in a few games last year. And coming into the season, he was second on the depth chart to Josh Drayden. So, I mean...
I just want to say Josh Drayden, in my opinion, had one of he was probably Cal's best defender in that game. I think he had solid coverage. He's probably their best open field tackler in the secondary, and he also had a huge stop on a 2-point conversion. But the rest of the secondary, not so much.
Yeah, and it just seemed so on Nevada's first touchdown of the game, that it was like a 47-yard pass from Strong to Dubs. Gamble just got burned. It wasn't even necessarily a great ball to Dubs. It's just Gamble wasn't even in the same zip code. So I mean, that's just something. It's just a relatively young secondary right now, at least with Gamble. So that's something to look out for. But I thought the D line was getting to Strong in that first quarter, at least a little bit. After that, it just seemed like Strong was sitting back. He controlled the tempo. He had way too much time for someone of his talent. You got to get to him throughout the game, not just for the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that hinges on Cal's 2 outside linebackers. I mean, those are their stars, Coin Dang and Cam Good. Dang is a captain, and Cam Good is probably Cal's most highly touted defender in terms of NFL prospects. And they had 3 tackles each, and that's it. No tackles for loss, no sacks, and they weren't even generating a ton of pressure. I mean, Cam Good got close a couple times, but it seemed to me like Coin Dang was really having trouble using his power to shed blocks. I mean, he does have a thinner frame, but if he's going to play outside linebacker in this Wilcox scheme, he's going to need to be able to, get past those tackles and generate pressure. And they're the anchors of this defense, arguably Cal's 2 most dynamic athletes on that side of the ball. And, I think fans are definitely going to be expecting a lot more from them moving forward this season. But one more bright spot is I want to shout out J.H. Tevis along the D-line. You mentioned that they were getting some pressure, and he led the team with tackles with 6 and also 2.5 tackles for loss. And for a guy who was kind of buried on the depth chart a couple years back, he had a good season in 2020 during Cal's 4 games, and I think it's clear that he's stepping up this season as well. So he's going to be a major cog, especially with Brett Johnson out for the next little bit.
And I think a bright spot on the offense was Jeremiah Hunter. He only had 2 catches, 2 completions, but he was solid. He had that 28-yard reception in the first quarter that set up the first or the second touchdown, or Cal's second touchdown. Came back to the ball. He looked great. I know threw or targeted Hunter on his interception, but I thought he looked great. I think he tied Remigio and the rest of the receivers for about 35 yards. I think they all got 35 yards receiving each. And on just 2 completions, I think he's going to be a solid player in the future. So I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, it was also interesting to see some of those other younger receivers definitely ahead on the depth chart from guys who we thought maybe would get a couple snaps, like Maven Anderson, J. Michael Sturdivant. But I remember we mentioned this earlier. It might take a few more games for those guys to start getting their reps. But so Cal, first loss of Justin Wilcox's non-conference regular season career. And that started to stir up a lot of stuff on social media. Some people have been, seeing the Wilcox era as already being pretty stagnant over the past couple of years, kind of that the team had hit their ceiling. And with 0-1 already in the books and 0-2 potentially coming up, with TCU being heavily favored in this game, a lot of people are starting to talk about how long these coaches are going to stay around. I know one of our coworkers, Jesse, he made the prediction while we were in the box that he doesn't think this coaching staff is going to last after this season. And so I wanted to, bring this up because clearly the offense is nowhere near where it needs to be. Any of the seasons Wilcox has been coached, besides his first one, Cal had, an average offense, but since then it's been dead last. And same thing this past game. I mean, nothing really to write home about apart from a few runs here and there. And then on the defensive side, Cal's usually been a bend but don't break team under Wilcox, and that they've had a solid defense. But I mean, sometimes they have trouble, maintaining that consistency. So, what do you think? I mean, could Wilcox be axed after this season, or do you think that's all talk, just Twitter fingers right now?
I think it's a little bit premature. I think Wilcox would have to only get 1 or 2 more wins this year to really be on the hot seat. Cal has never expected a whole lot out of its football programs, and I think now that he's only 21 and 22, he's just under 500 all time as Cal's head coach. He's won a bowl game. The 2 years before last year, COVID season, 7-6, 8-5, solid years. So he'd have to have a 3-9 year this year to even be considered, and even then, they might give him one more chance. So I really think Cal would have to just go completely down the drain for the rest of the season for him to be on the chopping block.
Yeah, I think before 2020, this wasn't even worthy of being a question. I mean, Cal was, like you said, improving every season from 2017 to 2019, adding one win each year. And they were projected by many to win the Pac-12 North, or at least contend for it in 2020. Obviously, COVID derailed that season. So 2021, this year, was supposed to be all about proving that Cal could still be in that discussion. And the offense clearly needs to take a step forward for that to be possible. But, Wilcox being a defensive-minded head coach and Cal having a good defense, yes, that's great and all. But Wilcox is also in charge of hiring the coordinators. So if the offensive coordinators and the offensive assistant coaches aren't doing their jobs well, it's on Coach Wilcox at the end of the day. And Bo Baldwin had Cal at the bottom of the Pac-12, and Musgrave so far has also had Cal at the bottom of the Pac-12. So this year doesn't seem different so far, but obviously there's a lot of time to change that. And on my end, go ahead.
I just think that the offense can't keep regressing. I'm hoping that this
they honestly can't. Like, how you can't get worse than the worst.
At this point, you can't. I guess I mean they can't keep playing the way that they have.
Yeah.
If they do, I think Cal will finish 3-9, 2-10. If they play that poorly, defense may be able to keep them in a few games, and maybe Cal can eke out some 14-10 wins here and there. But the offense has to improve. If not, I think it has to improve at least marginally by the end of the year for Wilcox to keep his job.
Yeah, I also don't think there's any chance he gets fired this season unless it's a 2 or 3 win season. But I'm still, after one game, I think it would be very premature to jump to that being the conclusion. I know you were hovering around 6 wins. Maybe that's down to 5, maybe 4. But I think for me, the earliest that the school would look to switch from this coaching staff would be at the end of the 2022 season. I mean, Cal definitely still has its strengths. The recruiting classes have definitely gotten stronger overall during the Wilcox era. And like I said, defense has been a consistent strength. But one thing I do think is that they're either going to stick with this whole staff, meaning Wilcox and Musgrave and Sermon for the next few seasons, or they're going to fire them all at once. I don't think they're going to give Wilcox another chance to hire new offensive coordinators and bring them all up to speed. I think at this point it's kind of an all or nothing situation.
Right.
But it has only been one game. There's not too much to talk about on that front, but something we're definitely going to monitor as the season goes on. But for now, tomorrow is a tough test for Cal. They're currently 11.5-point underdogs to TCU. Going down to Texas, I believe the weather is supposed to be in the 90s. Don't know whether that'll be a factor or not, but this game, for me, I part of me wants to say it feels like Cal's journey to Ole Miss in 2019, where they're taking on an SEC heavyweight. I mean, obviously not amongst the best SEC teams, but still compared to a measly Pac-12 team, Ole Miss was still a tough test. But it feels similar to that heading to TCU, except for the fact that Cal, I believe, was on a 3-game win streak heading into Ole Miss and were undefeated. And this is obviously a very different scenario. But, Garber's had a fantastic game during that, so they're going to need something close to that performance if they want this upset over TCU.
Yeah, and I think TCU's defense has been solid under Gary Patterson. I know that the 3 years prior to 2020, they finished first in the Big 12 and in defense. So and they've got some young players on the defensive side of the ball. So they're not going to be one of the best, or they're not going to be the best defense in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 this season. But they're always one of the best. Gary Patterson coached teams, like I said, have great defenses. So that makes me particularly concerned for Cal. I don't think TCU's offense will give them too much trouble, but TCU's defense could very well keep them below 14, well below 20. And Cal averaged 20, a little over 20 points per game last year, which is poor. So scoring 17 against Nevada is not good enough. They're going to have to score 30 against TCU to hopefully win, I think.
Yeah, I think the defense is definitely going to be carrying the load on Cal's side, but I actually do think that the Horned Frog offense is something that Cal should be definitely worried about, because Max Duggan is a very good dual threat quarterback, specifically more so running the ball than passing the ball, but he led TCU in both categories last season. He's very fast and also not scared to get hit. And the reason that makes me nervous is because Cal struggled tremendously against DTR in the UCLA game. Obviously, that game had other circumstances surrounding it, but it's going to be a lot on Cam Good and Coindang to contain him in the pocket. And, the ground game is often what kills Cal. Nevada was an exception, not the norm. And it's not like Duggan's their only option on offense. Their starting running back, Zach Evans, was a 5-star recruit who was initially committed to UGA, ended up at TCU, but he's very fast, very good at getting the edge. And, Cal's linebackers and Cal's secondary are going to have to showcase their sideline speed against this team for sure. And even on the receiving end, Quentin Johnson is someone who TCU writers and beat reporters are very, very high on him. I saw multiple predictions that he's going to have a 100-yard game, even against the Cal secondary. He's 6'4", very good at making contested catches, and can definitely run. And the rest of TCU's receivers are mainly shorter, speedier, shifty guys. So I do think this is a better receiver matchup for Cal's secondary compared to Nevada. I expect to see Chiggy on Quentin Johnson, probably just because of that size matchup. Chiggy being 6'2", can get physical with players, whereas Drayden and Colin Gamble are definitely two shorter and shiftier guys who can match up with those players a bit better.
Yeah, and to go back to Duggan, it'll be interesting to see how Cal kind of adjusts in this game to a true dual threat quarterback. Carson Strong, as far as I remember, he didn't use his feet almost at all, for good reason. And so it'll be interesting, like you said, to see how those linebackers adjust to having to keep an eye on a dual threat quarterback. Duggan only threw the ball 19 times in their first game against Duquesne, but he was efficient. And so I think, yeah, the TCU running game and Duggan using his feet will be a point of concern for Wilcox and Peter Sermon.
Yeah, and I don't even know how good of a game that is to use as a litmus test for TCU, because if I read correctly, it was such a blowout that the coaches agreed to shorten the quarters in the second half to 12 minutes to protect the players on the other team, which, I mean, they are an FCS school. Duquesne, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I don't think I'm ever going to have to say that name again. So I'll just breeze by it. But I think a lot of TCU reporters are talking about this as their first real test of the season, which is obviously a fair take. But let's start with some keys, because we mentioned our keys last game, and really Cal couldn't do any of them, to be frank. But I'll start. I think an important one is to win the turnover battle, and I think that's obviously a key in any football game. That's one of the biggest aspects of football. But it's clear, especially in this case, because Cal's offense cannot carry the load just by moving the ball downfield. So when they do have the ball, they need to take care of it, which they did a good job of last game, besides the late game interception by Garbers. But I think on the other side, Cal's defense really needs to help out the offense by forcing a turnover or two, because the offense just taking the ball 80, 90 yards down the field every drive is just not going to happen. Like, there's been nothing to indicate that that's going to happen. So I think the defense is hopefully going to get the chance to help out on at least, one or two drives.
Yeah. My key to the game, time of possession. When Cal dominated time of possession through that first quarter against Nevada, it was great. The defense had a time to take a breather. Defense almost didn't have to play at all in that first quarter. So controlling the ball, keeping the ball in the running game. And I think also, this may be obvious, but maybe just playing to your strengths, I think would be great if Musgrave looked at the stat sheet at the end of the first quarter and just kind of decided from there what to do. Maybe, analyze what was working right. I think Cal, because Cal has the tools to succeed. I think the O-line looked fantastic. So, I mean, with a solid O-line, you can open up the running game. Hopefully Garbers, if he has a little bit more time maybe, and Remigio and Crawford can create some separation. Maybe we can get some big plays, which Cal desperately just lacked completely against Nevada. I think the longest play of the game was 28 yards. And so creating those big explosive plays, like you said last week, will be key as well.
Definitely. And I think it's time to get to some predictions, but I just want to preface by saying Cal has not started 0-2 since the 2001 season. So this would be, we had the last cut line before this talking about, the potential future of this coaching staff, and going 0-2 for the first time in 2 decades is not a good look. That's not something you want to have on your resume. So the line I mentioned earlier is at 11.5 right now. TCU obviously favored at home. I was doing a lot of research, and pretty much I think every single TCU beat writer, analyst, TCU article I read all picked the Horned Frogs to win by at least double digits, and most of them were blowouts, like not even close. So that team really expects to win. I'm sure the team itself expects to win, and all their fans expect to win. And honestly, I have no real reason to believe that Cal can go down to Texas and win this game. Do I think it's possible? Of course, because Cal has a knack for causing big upsets. I mean, I think when they're favored to lose by 7 points or more, I think Cal has won 6 out of 14 of those games where they're predicted to lose by 7 or more, which 6 out of 14, that's like close to 50-50 when you're predicted to lose by a lot, like in this case. So, I mean, they've definitely proven that they can pull out unexpected wins. But the only difference is a lot of the times there was momentum going into those games. You think of an early game against UW where Cal got to 2-0, or again the game against Ole Miss where Cal got to 4-0. This is just not that, and for that reason, I'm going to have to go with 27-18 TCU. I just don't think the offense has shown enough to warrant me picking them.
Okay, I'm surprised you have that much faith in us scoring 18. I'll go 14-28 to the Horned Frogs.
All right.
I think, like you said, Cal doesn't expect to win. Wilcox will be trying to get his team fired up, but after losing in such a way to Nevada, I think Cal's self-esteem will be quite low. I don't know. Wilcox has a tough task to try to get his team fired up for TCU.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what happens, I don't think we can see a worse offensive performance between these two games than the Cheez-It Bowl a few years ago. I think that was infamously known as one of the worst and best bowl games of all time because of how horrible both offenses were. So I don't think it'll be that this time around, but we can only wait and find out. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out Dash Sports on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And